All right, man, peace. So many brothers have been asking me to provide them with an update on my perspective on the Kristaps Porzingis trade, which the New York Knicks and the Dallas Mavericks executed a few days before the trade deadline. All I can tell you, brothers, is that when I first heard about the trade, the only thing going through my mind is that Kristaps got dumped before he could dump the Knicks. And that happens sometimes in life. Cats think they're going to cut a chick off and she cuts them off first. Or a chick thinks that she's going to cut a guy off and he cuts her off first. That's all that happened to Kristaps. He was showing signs that he wanted to be out of the relationship, and the Knicks told him, you know what, have a nice day. It's not us, it's you. And that's why Kristaps got tight with that little lame-ass Instagram post about the truth will come out soon. Dude, nobody wants to hear what you have to say. I've been telling you brothers for a very long time now that Kristaps Porzingis does not impress me. There was a moment in time at the start of the 2017-2018 season where I was giving him a lot of credit for his growth as a player. I even made a video where I stated that he was going to be that year's most improved player. And then 25 games into the season, this motherfucker sat down after the game and said, I'm tired. That was his way of saying he could not deal with the pressure of being the number one player on a team that really had no expectations. Now, what do I expect from Kristaps Porzingis for the remainder of his career? I expect that he's going to go to Dallas and play very well for about 3 or 4 years, and then his body's going to break down. He reminds me of a Yao Ming, of course, a much slimmer version of a Yao Ming who can shoot from the outside. His body is not built to last in the NBA. Even with the contactless sport that the NBA has become, he's not built to last. But he fits in perfect with what Dallas wants because they need a player who can replace Nowitzki. Both he and Nowitzki are tall, lanky Caucasians who can shoot from long range. So it pretty much is going to be Porzingis is going to take the baton from Nowitzki, team up with Luka Doncic, and they're going to be Mark Cuban's dream. A European or a Eurocentric team that can possibly compete for the playoffs. I don't think that they're ever going to get to the point where they're competing for championships, but you're going to find that all of their moves are going to be based on making sure that they supplement those two European players. And I did a couple of videos prior to the deadline where I told you that Mark Cuban had declared war on the black players in the NBA. I had certain Caucasians and quite a few brothers who jumped into my comments trying to argue with me, claiming that I was taking things too far. Anybody who's been on my channel for long enough knows that I don't play the quote-unquote race card. This is a pro-truth channel. My channel is a pro-truth channel geared towards the so-called black man. I don't get into the circular racial conversation with the so-called white man. That's a waste of my time. In order for me to get into a conversation with you about anything of importance, I have to hold you to a degree of importance, and I don't hold them to a degree of importance. My channel's focused on the so-called black man so that he can understand and see what's going on around him. Not to get into redundant, endless, and inconsequential conversations talking about quote-unquote race that lead nowhere and don't benefit me at all. I don't have time to waste. But just getting back to the point, I did a video about Mark Cuban stating that he had basically declared war on the NBA's black players. He had the nerve to claim that Slovenian players or European players are better schooled in basketball than American black players. And a lot of cats tried to jump into my comments section to claim that what he was saying was true. When I watch Luka Doncic play, I don't see anything different in how he plays to a James Harden or a Russell Westbrook or a LeBron James. It's very obvious who he tries to copy when he plays basketball. There was even a clip of Luka Doncic at Steph Curry's preseason basketball camp trying to do all the drills that Steph Curry was doing, and he was floundering very badly. Once again, this notion that Slovenian players or European players are better schooled in the game of basketball is not only a slap in the face of the American black NBA player, it's also a slap in the face of the American coaches. So nothing could be further from the truth. And the fact of the matter is that the record of foreign national teams against the American national team whenever they engage in international competition speaks volumes when it comes to who's better schooled and who are the better players. Thereafter, I did a follow-up video where I stated that the black players on the Dallas Mavericks were upset with Mark Cuban. I named Dennis Smith Jr. and Harrison Barnes, and lo and behold, who got traded away from the Mavericks but Dennis Smith Jr. and Harrison Barnes. So it's very predictable to me. And I don't understand why there's a conundrum from certain pea-brained, low-level thinking cats who tried to combat the notion that Mark Cuban is a quote-unquote racist. I don't care either way. But to me, the proof is in the pudding. He was the only owner who publicly sided with Donald Sterling when that whole issue arose with Donald Sterling's phone call conversations being made public when he got into that little dust-up with the transgender, half-black, half-Filipino prostitute that he was dealing with, that little monarch sex kitten that he was messing with, who was sent in to make sure that there was a situation created where he could be removed from the NBA. That whole situation was contrived and a setup from the very start so that Donald Sterling could make probably quintuple what the team was worth on his way out. And it also was a way to ingratiate Adam Silver with the simple-minded, woke black players in the NBA from the very start. That's why they love Adam Silver so much to this day, because Donald Sterling fell on his sword so that the other so-called Caucasian liberal Jew, Adam Silver, could look like the good guy. And I've touched on this in the past. If you understand the word games that they were playing, Donald Sterling got kicked out by Adam Silver, Sterling Silver. It is what it is. They play games like this on the public all the time. The point being is that Mark Cuban was the only owner who stood up for Donald Sterling when it was obvious that he should have just stayed down. Point being is this. Mark Cuban is the only owner who stood up for Donald Sterling when it was very obvious that he should have stood down and just let the man take his punishment, move along with his $3 billion or $2 billion, however much money he made off of the sale of the Clippers, a franchise that he bought, I believe, back in 1980 or 1981 for about $20 million. That man made a killing. So this notion that the NBA punished Donald Sterling is a complete fabrication. Just to get back to the point, though, as we watch the Dallas Mavericks from here on out, pay very close attention. The entire offense will revolve around the pick and roll between Luka Doncic and Kristaps Porzingis. All the other players on the team will be 3-and-D guys whose job it will be to rebound the basketball, play defense, and only shoot when you're wide open if Luka or Kristaps decides to kick the ball out to you. Very similar to how the game was played in the late 50s, early 60s. When black players were on a basketball team, their job was to rebound and play defense back then. That's why Wilt Chamberlain and Elgin Baylor were so transformative. They were the first black players who were allowed to shoot the basketball. Prior to that, the black players were only allowed to rebound and play defense. That was it. But when Elgin Baylor came into the league, he changed that whole paradigm. And then Wilt took it to another level. Then you had Oscar Robertson, who came into the league in 1960, and he was allowed to initiate the offense and run the point. That's how it went. But Mark Cuban and Rick Carlisle are trying to take their team back to the 1950s and that overall paradigm. That's really what's going on there. But anyway, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
But you know what, Max? You know what's really on my mind today? Is obviously the NBA. Good morning.
Oh, I can imagine. I can imagine.
Right? Forget football. We're focused on the NBA for a moment. Guys, let's get right into it. You know where I'm starting. Your city, the New York Knicks. So here's the deal. The Knicks traded their disgruntled star Kristaps Porzingis, Trey Burke, Courtney Lee, and Tim Hardaway Jr. to the Mavs in exchange for Dennis Smith Jr., Wesley Matthews, DeAndre Jordan, and 2 future first-round picks. Now, this move means the Knicks now have $73 million in cap space, enough to sign 2 max free agents this summer. We know how
the Knicks also received 2 future first-round picks. That's why I state, watch for the Knicks to be a major player in the offseason. Many brothers commented on my channel when I did a video on Kyrie Irving, and they said, well, how could the Knicks possibly get Kyrie, Kevin Durant, trade for Anthony Davis, and still be able to pick Zion Williamson #1 in the draft? If the Knicks were to allow a third team to get involved, they could send their first-round draft picks that they got from the Mavericks, maybe another first-round draft pick from down the line. These players here to make up for the cap space, another player from a third team, and be able to secure Anthony Davis. At least I'm sure they're going to touch on that. Even that I know is extremely far-fetched, and that's why I called it a quote-unquote miracle in the video that I did on Kyrie Irving. I believe that it was the video where Kyrie Irving was mocking the New England Patriots. Either way, the Knicks have put themselves in a good situation. And if you're a New York Knicks fan, I have no idea why you would be upset by this trade. Kristaps Porzingis was never going to be a superstar on the Knicks. He possibly could approach borderline star status on the Mavericks, but he was never going to approach that on the Knicks because he was very unhappy. In life, when people are trying to become a part of what you're doing and they're unhappy, you have to let them go. Because unhappy people are only happy when they make others unhappy.
How deep this free agency class is. Stephen A., I'll start with you. Was this the right move?
If you believe the New York Knicks, I think it is.
Absolutely was the right move. It was time for Kristaps Porzingis to go. He was a sourpuss. He was bitching too much. He was complaining too much, and he was more trouble than he was worth. For a player who's done very little in the NBA, he was talking too much shit.
Now, obviously, if this was James Dolan talking to us, I wouldn't believe a damn word that I'm hearing. But if you're talking about Steve Mills, the president, if you're talking about Scott Perry, the general manager, and you listen to what they're articulating, which is that Kristaps Porzingis, a guy that missed the last 34 games of the regular season last year because of that nasty knee injury, who hasn't played the game this year, who prospective marquee free agents are looking at if they want to be a New York Knick to see, A, what his health situation looks like, whether or not he's going to be ready to go into the future, and B, whether or not he wants to be there. When this man walks into your office and tells you that he no longer wants to be a part of your franchise and that he is not going to hide the fact that he doesn't want to be there, essentially he's telling you he wants out and that he's going to encourage others not to want to come in. If you're the new...
And that's the reason why they had to get rid of him. Because we have to understand the timeline of this whole acrimony, or the source of the acrimony between Kristaps Porzingis and the Knicks. He was drafted by Phil Jackson. He saw Phil Jackson treat Carmelo Anthony like how Phil Jackson understood Carmelo Anthony to be. Not how the other players in the NBA view Carmelo Anthony, but how Phil Jackson viewed Carmelo Anthony. That being a basketball dinosaur. That offended Kristaps because he grew up on Carmelo Anthony. That was strike one. Strike two was the regime change, where Phil Jackson left, they brought in Steve Mills, and still Kristaps Porzingis was extremely unhappy. Then they brought in the coach David Fizdale, which in my view was strike three. It's very obvious that Kristaps Porzingis has no respect for Fizdale, despite Fizdale making a lot of effort to develop a rapport with him. He traveled overseas to go visit Kristaps. Now, Fizdale made a misstep, when he stated that Kristaps Porzingis was not allowed to be on his feet too much running. But what did Kristaps do the next day? He decided that he was going to Instagram a photo of him running around a track. That was very clearly a shot at his coach. Also remember that Kristaps Porzingis has a connection to the Spanish national team, that being Marc Gasol, Pau Gasol. Now, we know that Marc Gasol had a big flame out with Fizdale when he was the coach of the Memphis Grizzlies last year. So it's very obvious that Marc Gasol got into the ear of Kristaps Porzingis and added to some of the bitterness that Porzingis clearly already had. So they had to get him out of there. He was a malcontent. He thought that he would never be traded because he believed that he was so valuable to the Knicks franchise. Always remember something. When you're down and out already, there's really nothing of value that you have. You can get rid of everything when you're already down and out. Don't ever be scared to get rid of someone or something who's trying to make you believe that you need them, even when you're at the bottom. That's why they have that saying, I can do bad all by myself. Why do I need somebody else and do badly? All they're going to do is be negative. That is what Porzingis was doing. He had to go.
New York Knicks, and you're thinking about your future, you have to make that move. So now we dissect and we analyze, what move did they make? Okay, DeAndre Jordan, $22 million. That's coming off your cap at the end of the season. Wes Matthews, $18 million. That's coming off your cap at the end of the season. You're talking about the New York Knicks, who had approximately $30 million in cap space, now having $74 million in cap space. A minimum of $68 million, potentially as high as $77 million, but right now along the lines of $74.6 million or something along those lines. That gives them the opportunity to get not one, but two max players in free agency. You're talking Kevin Durant, Klay Thompson, Kyrie Irving, just to name a few, who are all scheduled. Kemba Walker as well, all scheduled to be available this coming free agency. You acquired Dennis Smith Jr., who that damn Phil Jackson should have drafted instead of Frank Ntilikina.
I've stated this in the past about the New York Knicks fan base. They're the most poisonous fan base in the entire NBA. They're so prohibitively negative. They have no understanding that they aid in the overall aura or vibration around their team. They're one of the reasons why free agents do not want to sign with the Knicks, because they know how negative the fan base is. It's very similar to a woman who can't get a good man because she has negative friends around her. And she does not even understand how negative her friends are. She brings her prospective man around her friends, and the man sees the type of negativity coming off of her friends, and he says, you know what, I'm not fucking with all this nonsense. I'm out. Goodbye. Knicks fans, especially in the media, get on TV and always talk about how they expect everything to go poorly. Well, if you expect everything to go poorly, that is how everything is going to go.
Some dude from Paris, okay? This is the guy that he drafted instead of Dennis Smith Jr. So you got him at only $5 million. You've created enough cap space to get 2 max players, and you put yourself in play to compete against a Brooklyn Nets team who's about 3 games over 500, devoid of a star, but clearly aiming to have enough cap space for 2 max players as well, along with the Los Angeles Clippers, who's clearly aiming for that as well. If you're going to compete with them, you had to create enough cap space, because the belief is if we have enough cap space to get 2, we have a better chance at getting a marquee free agent than
the Knicks are going to land somebody. It's just a matter of who it is. I do believe that if they were to get either Kyrie Irving or Kevin Durant, it's most likely going to be a package deal because, number one, the 2 of them are very close. Number 2, I doubt that either one of them would leave the franchise that they're currently with, who are viewed as being title contending teams, without the understanding that the other one is also going to be there. Now, if one of those players do not come to the Knicks, that probably means that neither one of those players are going to come to the Knicks. And it will most likely mean that the Knicks will end up with a second-tier star like a Tobias Harris or a Jimmy Butler, somebody along those ranks, a Kemba Walker. I could see the Knicks ending up next year with Kemba Walker and Jimmy Butler in the backcourt. Wouldn't surprise me at all.
If we only had a cap space for 1 and we're asking somebody to come here and be the savior by themselves. That's the thinking of the New York Knicks. And even though I don't necessarily like it per se, because a star is leaving them, I can't ignore the fact that I can't blame them for going all in, because, my God, nothing else that they have done in the last 20 years has worked. This is a new plan, the first time they've been in a situation like that, and I applaud it.
I do as well.
You know how Godzilla stomps through Tokyo? I'm about to do Maxzilla stomping through New York because I'm going to flame the Knicks right now.
Bars.
That is utter nonsense. The Knicks, let me explain something. I understand you're repeating what they're telling you. That's their thinking. That's their thinking. But let me explain what's wrong with it, okay?
Yeah, break it down.
Okay? First of all, the idea that they're creating cap space for 2 max contracts, you better get 2 max contracts. And by the way, Knicks...
So your issue is not that they've created space for 2 max contracts. Your issue is that you don't believe that they're going to be able to sign 2 verifiable, quote-unquote, max players. Max Kellerman, all they can do is open up the space and hope for the best. So your first contention is not a real contention. You're just bitching. Next.
Knicks, the best player you get better not be Jimmy Butler, because that's the history of the Knicks. They aim for LeBron, they get Stoudemire. They aim for Charles Barkley, they get Larry Johnson. They aim for Tim Hardaway, they get Chris Childs. I remember all of this.
Right, but it's very tough for you to debate those points because that 96-97 Knicks team, they really had a chance to get to the finals. They blew it when they had a mental faux pas in that brawl against the Miami Heat. But that team was very scary in the playoffs. They would have given the 97 Bulls a great run for their money had they not come off the bench. So that's not quite a good example. I understand what you're getting at, but Charles Barkley was old. Tim Hardaway was always going to go back to the Miami Heat. I mean, it just is what it is.
In New York City, whenever there's a lot of times you have 2 teams in each sport, right? Because it's such a huge place. Now, it's not to say that the good franchise is always good. Sometimes it's bad, like the New York Giants right now. I understand that. But by and large, you have the Heritage franchise, the Yankees, the Giants, and the Clown franchise, the Mets, the Jets. The Knicks, unfortunately, are both. They are both the Heritage franchise in town, but they are, in fact, the Clown franchise because of the way they were run.
Well, one can also make the claim that maybe they have a clown fan base. Not to go too hard on the Knicks fans, but Knicks fans have to learn how to be more positive. Like, either be positive or don't watch the team. But all this constant negativity, this acerbic nature that people think is helping their franchise is not working. If you want the owner gone, then go about it in a more systematic way.
If you are arguing, Knicks, that you need to create cap space for 2 max deals, or do you think we're stupid?
Yes.
The point of a franchise player on a rookie deal like Kristaps Porzingis, The point of a 7'3" pure shooting defensive monster who can put it on the floor, defend out in space, and protect the rim. The point of that guy is that you clear cap space to sign 2 max contracts, and you get to keep Kristaps Porzingis.
Max Kellerman, maybe you did not hear what Stephen A. Smith was saying. He said very clearly that Kristaps Porzingis did not want to be there. And on top of that, according to Stephen A. Smith, he states that Kristaps Porzingis alleges that he was going to tell any prospective free agents who were considering signing with the Knicks that the Knicks were not the franchise to be with. So that blows up your theory right there, sir.
Every other franchise would do that. Remember when the Rockets traded Hakeem Olajuwon to free up cap space so they could go after 2 last free agents? Or when the Dallas Mavericks did it with Dirk Nowitzki? Or when the Spurs did it with Tim Duncan? Oh, they didn't do that, did they?
Well, Max Kellerman, I have news for you. Kristaps Porzingis, and if I'm wrong about this, I will state it in a subsequent video down the line. Kristaps Porzingis will never in his life, ever in his life, be Hakeem Olajuwon, Dirk Nowitzki, or Tim Duncan. Sorry, sir. Kristaps Porzingis will be lucky to have the career that Yao Ming had.
They used those players they drafted as centerpieces to build dominant franchises with. Duh. That is the point. In New York, there's a phrase for this. They call them bums. The Knicks have behaved like a bum franchise for decades now. This is not that hard. Now, Stephen A., I know I am the guy who has been saying, look, trade Porzingis. Don't do it to him. Don't keep him. So this has worked out great for Porzingis. But right now, I am talking about Knicks fans. The Knicks, to argue now, Stephen A., that they needed to create cap space. Hey, geniuses, we've known this free agent crop has been amazing for years now. A good franchise doesn't dig themselves cap holes, doesn't acquire cap problems heading into this year. They've cleared the decks, so you have Kristaps Porzingis and cap space. The idea that
Dude, once again, what are you arguing about? Kristaps Porzingis does not want to be there. He's the best chip that you have to be able to get the haul that you got back. And this notion that the Knicks should have drafted Dennis Smith Jr. already, they have him now. It's not that big a deal. Kristaps Porzingis is a nice player. We have no idea how good he's going to be. He's gone now. We have to deal with the here and now. The Knicks have 2 max spots. Hopefully they'll be able to accrue max level talent. We'll find out.
that you use him to get out of cap problems that you've created, not Steve Mills. I understand. It's tough to. I'm not talking about Steve Mills.
You gotta take a breath for a moment. We got all show to get into this. Stephen A., I want you to give a quick reaction, and then we got Drew Brees coming up.
Max is not wrong about what he's saying.
Yes, he is.
All of his points are valid.
No, they're not.
But there's a couple of things. A, Dirk Nowitzki was never able to attract a marquee player to the Dallas Mavericks franchise. B, and more importantly, everything else the New York Knicks has done has been an absolute disaster. So the bottom line is, you go for it.
And Max Kellerman, Mr. I agree with Sam Hinkie, tanked for 5 straight years. It's amazing what he agrees with as opposed to what he's getting mad about. The Knicks are finally tanking. They're finally getting rid of assets that don't want to be there and setting themselves in a position where, number one, they're going to have a high draft pick. Also, they have the potential the potentiality that 2 top-notch free agents could sign with them. They're in a very Philadelphia 76er type mode right now. So that shows you that he's just in his feelings.
Because Kristaps Porzingis didn't want to be there.
Of course.
You knew you had to move.
And this free agency
But real
process,
quick, Molly, to say you have to use Porzingis.
And a lottery pick. Max, come on.
Molly, to say you have to...
They really need to check this female right here, because she swears that she's a debater. And she's the type that when she gets called out for trying to inject herself in the debates, she claims that she's just a moderator. Well, then you need to moderate. I don't think that she really knows what her job is. Maybe she needs to watch some old Joy Taylor tapes, because Joy Taylor was the best moderator that I've seen on either one of these channels since I've been watching the debate format. Joy Taylor always kept her mouth shut. And when she was asked to interject, she always made good points. Molly Karam sometimes makes good points, but it's in a terrible package because she's so intrusive and she's always running her damn mouth out of turn.
To use Porzingis to get out of contract and then to acquire Dennis Smith Jr. that you could have drafted. He was available for you to draft. You passed on him
Coulda, woulda, shoulda. We have to deal with what's here.
Also a lot going on in the association, and that's where I want to start right now. Let's pick it up with the Knicks. The Knicks traded their disgruntled star Kristaps, Porzingis, Trey Burke, Courtney Lee, and Tim Hardaway Jr. to the Mavericks in exchange for Dennis Smith Jr., Wesley Matthews, DeAndre Jordan, and 2 future first-round picks. Now, the move means the Knicks will have $73 million in cap space. That's enough to sign 2 max free agents this summer. Are you seeing this list? Talk about a deep club.
Of course, the top 2 names that the Knicks will be targeting will be Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. But I could easily see them. Ending up with Kemba Walker and Jimmy Butler.
Deep class for 2019.
And let me say this: if those were the 2 players that they ended up with playing in their backcourt, I promise you they're going to make the playoffs.
You know what, Stephen A? I heard you're missing Max.
Huh?
I heard you're missing Max. Max?
No, Max.
Are you still here?
Max hasn't given me an opportunity to miss him. He's
There he
incredibly,
is.
he's incredibly passionate about it. Let him
There's
speak.
the handsome devil. Hello, Max. Welcome back. I'm going to pick up with you because I feel like you have a lot to get off your chest with this subject. Max, the fans showing you a lot of love right now, rightfully so. But how will this Knicks move impact free agency, this trade?
You know what's so interesting? Look, the Knicks now have to get, like, KD and Kyrie. You can't just get one free agent, and it can't be like Jimmy Butler's the best guy you got, and then you get Bogdanovich or someone like that. You have to get 2 MVP caliber free agents after this move.
No, they don't. They just have to be a decent team next year, man. That's all. If the Knicks were able to score a couple of good free agents, or even just one, and contest for a playoff spot next year, that would be far greater than anything that Kristaps Porzingis has done.
This move if you're the Knicks. And by the way, they shouldn't have had a cap problem in the first place. They should be able to get those 2 and keep Porzingis. Porzingis should be a lure for those guys.
Porzingis does not want to be there. He did not want to be there. He was on record as stating that he was going to warn other free agents away from the Knicks. What part of that are you not getting? Is it something having to do with the prescription drugs that you take every morning? Is that what's blocking your hearing or your understanding? It's some basic shit, man.
But of course it's the Knicks, so this is what you're looking at. Stephen A., I don't think anyone's looked at this from the Dallas Mavericks point of view in terms of how that affects free agency. First of all, the Mavericks have never been enough of a lure for teams, and I don't know why. They seem to have a team-friendly owner.
Allegedly, they have a team-friendly owner. But as I've stated in other videos, it's very obvious that many of the players in the NBA know a lot more about Mark Cuban and the Dallas Mavericks franchise than the fan base or the media, or at least more than the media let on that they know. Because once again, Dallas is a major market. There's a lot going on in that city. One would think that players would like to sign there, but maybe they know a lot about Mark Cuban. Remember, Mark Cuban is the same guy who created that fraternity atmosphere in his offices where he had idiotic black men running around harassing women, beating up on girlfriends, and supposedly he's trying to protect them. Maybe that was a projection on his part to hide how he really felt. Let me let these silly niggas here in the office run around and make fools of themselves, and when they get caught, I'll just act like I'm protecting them. When in all reality, he feels a different type of way. Who knows? But it's very obvious that there's something wrong in the Dallas Mavericks franchise when it comes to how players perceive they'll be treated once they're there.
Maybe it's because they play in the same market, or until recently it seemed like a team-friendly owner. Maybe it's a player-friendly owner. Maybe it's because they play in the same market as the Cowboys, and and this is forever. I'm here now. A Cowboys town.
Dude, ain't nobody thinking about that. If they're a top-notch franchise, they will have a lure for free agents. Once again, it's very obvious that many of the players do not want to be bothered with Mark Cuban. You know, $30 million is not the same everywhere. Sometimes you can go somewhere and know that you're going to have a peace of mind and you'll sign there, as opposed to getting $30 or $40 million from an owner who's always going to be hovering in your ear, running his mouth, trying to act like he's the coach, which is pretty much what Mark Cuban likes to do. Rick Carlisle is just an extension of Mark Cuban. That's why he's able to stay there for so long and never get removed, no matter how bad the team is.
Maybe it's because it's not L.A. or New York, but Dallas is a warm weather city. There's no state income tax. Cuban has been perceived, his reputation sullied recently, in recent years,
Yes, his reputation has been sullied recently when facts about him started to come forth as opposed to media-driven sentiment about him.
Has been perceived as player-friendly. They had Dirk Nowitzki and...
No, not player-friendly. Playa-friendly. Playa. Not player, playa-friendly. We know what's been going on in those offices. This guy has... this guy has prominent officials working for his organization who are beating up women. And he just don't say anything about it. It's like, come on, man.
And won a championship in the last decade. Guys, think about this for a second. They now have Luka Doncic and Kristaps Porzingis and almost $30 million of cap space and a $13 million trade exception.
So it's going to be very interesting to see how they utilize all those things. It's going to be very interesting to see if they're able to lure in a top-notch free agent to play alongside Luka Doncic and Kristaps Porzingis. And what will be his complexion, the player that they lure in there. Because once again, I'm going to tell you brothers this right now. The Dallas Mavericks offense is going to be run strictly through Luka Doncic and Kristaps Porzingis. And any and all black players there are going to be made to just rebound and play defense. That's it. Every once in a while, you'll be allowed to take a wide open three-pointer. But other than that, give the ball to Luka and get out the way.
Everyone's talking about how attractive the Knicks are. In fact, the Mavericks right now, because they have Porzingis, who the new Knicks have, are more attractive to free agents than they were before the trade, in my view.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. But as I stated at the beginning of the video, when I watch Luka Doncic play, he looks like a right-handed James Harden. I don't see much different from him. And how many free agents have clamored to go play with James Harden other than CP3, a player who basically is on his last leg and desperate to have the opportunity to compete for a championship?
Well, the Dallas Mavericks won a championship when we were alive, so we appreciate that. And as a result, we're not really thinking about them into the future. We recognize the fact that they put themselves in a formidable position and they're to be congratulated. But the issue is involving the New York Knicks, and I think there needs to be a level of appreciation to the Porzingis situation. He was threatening to sign a qualifying offer. He signs the qualifying offer. It eradicates any kind of leverage the New York Knicks would have had. It would have compromised them cap-wise, and he was essentially basically saying, I have no intentions of staying here, and his presence alone, feeling that way, dating back to the Phil Jackson era when he had to intervene because he spoke up for himself in the Knicks more than Carmelo Anthony was willing to at that particular juncture. So you know what kind of cat Porzingis is. He don't play. He made it very, very clear he didn't want to stay, that he was looking to leave, and if you kept him, it would be to your detriment, particularly as you were pursuing things in free agency. So considering that reality, I think it left the New York Knicks with no choice but to do what they did.
Absolutely. If you're living with your woman and your woman comes and tells you, I met somebody, I'm in love with him, you know, it's time for her or you to leave. How you going to dwell in the same abode with somebody who no longer likes you or has any feeling for you whatsoever, or no longer is willing to maintain the dynamic that you guys had together? It's time for one of you guys to go. Makes no sense to stay in the same abode. It's only going to lead to friction and more friction. So Kristaps, he wrote his exit letter. He just did not understand that. He thought that he thought he had the Knicks by the balls so much. It's almost like a dude with an ugly chick. He thinks he could talk to her however he wants. Because he says to himself, this bitch can't get another man to replace me. Well, you know, the ugly broad got her hair done. She got a tight dress on. She been going to the gym. You know, she went to the club and she got a phone number. So now she's ready to kick you to the curb.
And by doing what they did, they put themselves in play for two max players because they communicate with one another, they talk to one another, and you get guys that are fearful of coming to some place all by themselves, but they're more receptive to eventually ending up someplace if they get to come together. LeBron didn't go to Miami by himself. He didn't come back to Cleveland by himself. He didn't decide to go to LA thinking he was going to be there all by his lonesome. Whether it's Rich Paul or it's Anthony Davis, their mentality is come hella high water, Anthony Davis is going to end up a Laker. It might not be in 7 days. It might not be this summer. But damn it, it's going to happen by 2020. You can book it. So because that's...
It might happen by 2020, but will LeBron James still be able to run up and down the basketball floor? That's the question.
It's the reality. You have to know that LeBron James had that foresight as well. The New York Knicks had no choice, and that's what we have to look at.
Well, okay.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, but this is my beef. Look, that's not on Steve Mills and them. This is really on Dolan. This whole miserable era is Dolan's fault.
And that's what you're so upset about. You're trying to act as if the Knicks made all of these strategic errors when it comes to Porzingis, when really you're just upping your feelings about James Dolan. And that means that you're not really qualified to speak on this topic until and if you get your emotions together, because you're acting like a $2 hoe.
Obviously. However, that's on the Knicks. Like, forget about which regime, which administration in the Knicks. That's on the Knicks. If you dig yourself cap problems heading into this free agent class so that you need to use your best asset to get out of them. If your best player, who's a 40% shooter from 3 and 2.5 blocks a game, 7'3", can put it on the floor, Stephen A., can defend out in space and protect the rim, is a monster and still getting better. If that dude is...
Allegedly, he's still getting better. When last seen, this dude was complaining after the game that he was tired. I cannot get that image out of my mind. I'm sorry. I can't take you seriously after you say some shit like that. It's like a fighter who quits in a big moment in a big fight. From there on, you're going to be looked at as a quitter.
Dude is so disgruntled he wants to leave the center of the known universe, New York City, which is basketball crazy, by the way. That is on you. That's on the Knicks. The cap problems are on the Knicks. Porzingis' issues are on the Knicks. They bungled the situation. So you're right. This is the best they could do, given that they stumbled into this bad situation. But damn it, this was the franchise that found themselves here.
Okay, well, all we can do is move forward, man.
Well, basically what you're saying is, Stephen A., and to the nation out there, I'm just regurgitating my feelings about James Dolan because
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. That's all this is about. Thank you.
I can't stand the man because he's a bad leader, and this is the situation that they put them in. Because that's really what this comes down to. Larry Brown, Isaiah Thomas, Phil Jackson, the list goes on and on. That's been the same situation. James Dolan, the New York Knicks under James Dolan have had 2 winning seasons since 2000. 2 winning seasons, okay? A division crown and a trip to the semifinals of the Eastern Conference. That is all they have had. So based on your position, which is to be respected, understood, and fully appreciated by anybody who loves the New York Knicks, absolutely disgusted by it. All I'm saying is this: Steve Mills is there now. Scott Perry is there now. I have no choice but to look at them and go like this. I have no choice but to look at them and say, $75 million in cap space with the opportunity to get 2 max guys. That's not a bad situation to find yourself.
You're right, Stephen A. They're trying to make
running a franchise.
You have to respect that they went all in with this draft class.
Yup, they're trying to make lemonade out of lemons. And you know what they can do with the cap space? You know, Dolan pays actual, famous musical acts to open for them, right? So that he gets to be on stage opening for them.
Okay, he's about to go into his lame, corny joke about James Dolan playing his guitar for the Knicks or whatever. That's basically it on that. We'll see what happens with the Knicks. At least now they have the ability to potentially sign somebody major. Sometimes you have addition by subtraction. Kristaps Porzingis was a negative. He had to go. I'm sure that he will flourish far more in Dallas, where he'll be welcomed for more reasons than one. He'll be welcomed there, and he will be allowed to form a 2-man tandem with Luka Doncic. So they're definitely a team to watch over the next 4 or 5 years. So peace.